Aleister Crowley. You've probably heard the name, right? It's usually whispered with words like Satanist, sorcerer, or that one title that really stuck, the wickedest man in the world. But was he actually a dangerous madman, a misunderstood prophet, or something else entirely? Let's peel back the layers of the myth and get to the real story.
Yeah, the British press, they were not holding back. By the 1920s, Crowley was pretty much public enemy #1 in his own country. The tabloids went to town, painting this picture of pure evil. And that reputation was sealed by this huge international scandal that blew up, not in England, but all the way over in Italy.
That's right. The fascist dictator, Benito Mussolini himself, personally ordered Crowley to be kicked out of Sicily. The official reason was this wild mix of suspected anti-fascist activities and, well, a lifestyle that was just scandalizing the whole country. This one event basically cemented his infamous reputation on the world stage.
So you have to ask, what on earth was he doing in this place he called the Abbey of Thelema, that it got the attention of a dictator? I mean, this was no monastery, not in any way you'd recognize. It was the headquarters for his new religion, and the stories that were leaking out were pretty shocking.
The reality behind the whole uproar was, if anything, even wilder than the rumors. So picture a remote Sicilian farmhouse that's been turned into this libertine commune. The walls were covered in what the locals called obscene, macabre paintings. Daily life revolved around rituals that involved a lot of drugs and what Crowley called sex magic. But the final nail in the coffin was the tragic death of a young follower, Rol Loveday. Now, he almost certainly died from an infection he got from contaminated water, but the press ran with a much crazier story, that he died after drinking the blood of a sacrificed cat. And boom, with that headline, the label, "The Wickedest Man in the World," was born, and it never went away.
So that's the scandal. That's the myth. But how does somebody become a figure of such intense international controversy? To really get the man at the center of this whole firestorm, we've got to rewind and go right back to the beginning.
All right, Section 1. The Making of the Beast. Crowley's story, and this might surprise you, doesn't start in some den of sin. It starts in a home of extreme, hardcore religious piety. His journey from that pious son to public enemy is where this rebellion really kicks off.
So Crowley was born into this wealthy, fundamentalist Christian family. They were part of a group called the Plymouth Brethren. But when his dad, who was a preacher he adored, died, his whole world just fell apart. He lost his faith and started rebelling hard against his very strict mother. And it was his own mother, who, totally scandalized by his behavior, first called him the Beast from the Book of Revelation. It was a nickname he would later grab onto with both hands. At Cambridge, he reinvents himself as Aleister, and he's brilliant, a poet, a world-class mountaineer, a chess master. But then some kind of mystical crisis hits him, and he ditches a promising diplomatic career to dive headfirst into occultism. This leads him right to the famous Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. But turns out, even for a secret society, he was way too ambitious and way too scandalous, and they showed him the door pretty quick.
So, kicked out of the Cool Kids Occult Club, Crowley goes off to find his own way. And he doesn't just stumble upon a new philosophy. He claims one was basically downloaded directly into his brain. This is the absolute key to understanding everything else he did for the rest of his life. The Law of Thelema.
And the setting for this massive revelation? Cairo, Egypt. He's on his honeymoon with his new wife, Rose Kelly. And what's important here is that Rose had zero interest in the occult, which, according to Crowley, makes what happened next just all the more incredible.
It all started when Rose suddenly began entering these trance-like states, just repeating, "They're waiting for you." She said a message was coming through from the Egyptian god Horus. Crowley, ever the skeptic, decides to test her. He takes her to a museum in Cairo and basically says, "Okay, show me Horus." Without even hesitating, she walks him straight to this one specific funeral stela. And this is where the story gets really weird. The exhibit number for that stela, which neither of them knew, was 666, the number of the beast. That was enough for him. Now totally convinced, Crowley performs a ritual. And he claims that for 3 straight days, a disembodied voice from some entity he called Iwas dictated the text that would become his new Bible, the Book of the Law.
And the core of that whole book boils down to this one single electric phrase. It's the most famous and, honestly, the most
profoundly misunderstood line he ever wrote. Most people hear it and think it's just a free pass for selfishness, for pure hedonism, for total chaos.
But come on, was that really it? Was the great philosophy from this super complex, intelligent guy really just do whatever you feel like? As you've probably guessed by now, the real answer is a whole lot deeper than that.
And here it is, the single most important thing to get about him. The common interpretation, yeah, it's pure hedonism. But what Crowley actually meant was deeply philosophical. Do what thou wilt doesn't mean do whatever you want. It means you have to discover your one true will, and that's will with a capital W. He believed every single person has a unique destiny, a true purpose. So the whole point of life wasn't to chase every little whim, but to find that one true path, and then make sure every single thing you do is aligned with it. It's about creating a life of absolute purpose.
This is where his definition of magic comes in. And yeah, he spelled it with a K at the end to separate it from stage magic, pulling rabbits out of hats. For him, magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. What that means is that any act, whether it's making a cup of tea or climbing a mountain, if you do it with intention and it lines up with your true will, that is a magical act. It's really just the art of living deliberately.
Okay, so we've got the crazy reputation and the deep philosophy. But Crowley's legacy gets even stranger because it branches out into pop culture and even, you're not going to believe this, into the world of international espionage.
I mean, once you start looking, you see Crowley's influence everywhere. That's his face right there on the cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's album. Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin was so obsessed, he actually bought Crowley's old house on Loch Ness. Ozzy Osbourne wrote the hit song Mr. Crowley. David Bowie was hugely influenced by him, and his ideas helped shape modern Wicca, and he even had this bizarre run-in with the young L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, and he basically dismissed him as a total charlatan.
So his influence, you can't deny it. But this all leads to the final and, frankly, the most mind-bending question of all. What if the entire persona, the wickedest man in the world, the great prophet of a new age, what if it was all just an elaborate act, a cover for something else?
Well, there's a really compelling theory, put forward by historians like Richard Spence, that says Aleister Crowley's real job, his main gig his whole life, was as an agent for British intelligence. I know, it sounds like something out of a spy novel, but the evidence is surprisingly convincing.
Just look at the pieces. During World War I, he's in America writing this insanely over-the-top pro-German propaganda. The theory is that it was so ridiculous on purpose, designed to make the Germans look like clowns and help push the US into the war. He just had this weird habit of popping up in geopolitical hotspots right before they blew up. Moscow in 1913, Portugal in 1932. He even claimed that he advised MI5 on how to interrogate the high-ranking Nazi Rudolf Hess, using their shared belief in the occult against him. All of a sudden, this image of a globe-trotting occultist starts to look like the perfect cover story.
When you start to look at his life through that lens, everything just snaps into place in a totally new way. The constant travel, getting inside all these secret societies, the outrageous behavior that kept everyone at arm's length, it all starts to look a lot less like a spiritual quest and a lot more like the perfect cover for a master spy.
So, who was he in the end? A genuine magical pioneer who really did receive a new law for humanity? A dangerously charismatic con man who left a trail of ruined lives behind him? Or a brilliant intelligence agent hiding in plain sight the whole time? The truth, just like the man himself, is probably some complex, unsettling mix of all three. And that is exactly what makes him one of the most enduringly fascinating figures of the entire 20th century.